With the engine rebuild nearing completion on my Saab 900 Turbo, I wanted to take this car for a drive and discuss how it drives with the freshly rebuilt motor. I wanted to go over all of the parts that were replaced, the costs associated with all of the parts that were replaced, and lastly talk about what I think is still leaking on this car. Lots to get to today, but I think without further ado, let's hop in, take this thing for a drive.
So this admittedly is not the first time I have driven this car. I wanted this video to be sort of like the manual swap, where it's the actual first time I drive the car and you get my live reaction of it. Unfortunately though, I have driven it 2 or 3 times. Nothing crazy, nothing more than what we're gonna do today. I've probably put about 20 miles on it so far, and we've already run into quite a few issues, as you guys have seen. With this being a completely fresh motor, we're not going to be bashing on the car, driving it hard, which is a bit disappointing. We are going to do a 500-mile break-in period, essentially staying out of boost, not going above like 3,000, 3,500 RPM. We're about, like I said, 20-30 miles into that so far. And while my initial impressions are, when the car is running like it should, it runs fantastic. The new slave cylinder, everything working great with the transmission. When you do get into just a little bit of boost, you're probably not going to be able to hear it on camera, but you do get just a little whoosh, a little bit of a blow off from it, which sounds awesome. It still handles pretty poorly in my opinion, and when I said that in my POV driving video, a lot of people got very defensive of this car. And while this car does need new suspension, I mean, it does have a good amount of body roll. I'm sure the shocks are blown. It could probably use some new springs, new bushings. That'll all come with time. That'll probably be the next major project I undertake once it's running perfect mechanically, outside of some smaller projects here or there. I can't wait to start driving this car more regularly once these leaks are sorted. And speaking of leaks, let's talk about those, because it seems to be the bane of my existence right now. So we had that major oil leak that I showed in my last video. That was initially coming from the input shaft seal. That has been replaced. As far as I can tell, that is no longer leaking. Then we had an even worse oil leak, and that was coming from what I believe to be the input shaft seal cover. So that is that little gold cover. I'll put a picture of it on the screen. That little gold cover has a rubber seal in it. When I took that seal out, well, that seal had clearly been original to the car. It's apparently a very common leak point. So I ordered a new one of those, installed that yesterday. I let the car run for a bit, and now this is the second time the car is running. As far as I'm aware, and I'm pretty confident to say that that solved that leak. So after that, we're now left with some other issues. So I knew it had a small coolant leak from somewhere. I initially had noticed that that coolant leak was coming from one of the turbo return lines. I tried to snug that up with a wrench about a week ago. I don't think that has solved that issue. It looks like some coolant has already kind of burned up there and started to reaccumulate, I guess you could say, in that area. I also think the drain plug for the engine is leaking as well. Now, there is oil dripping off of it. I can't see anything wet above it or to the side of it or any direction. And when I put a 13 mil on there, it did snug up maybe about another 45 or 60 degrees worth of turn. So I'm pretty hopeful and confident that that leak is now going to be solved, but it was dripping out a pretty significant amount of oil. So where does that leave us? Well, that leaves us with the two significant or more cause for concern leaks that I still am seeing. The first one, I have no idea where it's coming from. It appears to be oil. It's coming from the highest point I can see it coming from. I'll put a picture on the screen. Is from the speedo cable area. Up above there, like where the crankshaft seal is, that timing cover, I felt up there with my hand, it all feels dry, which is great. But if you guys have any suggestions on other areas that might be leaking, by the time this video goes out, hopefully I would have figured it out. Please let me know. But like I said, the crankshaft area, the timing cover, that all seems dry. And then lastly, and this is quite frankly the one I am most concerned about and one I just discovered yesterday, is the water pump. I couldn't get a good picture of it, but there is a lot of coolant coming off the water pump, so we will have to deal with that. But besides that, like I've said, the car is driving great. Like the engine feels extremely healthy, extremely strong. And I am so excited to get this car sorted mechanically and actually drive it on a regular basis. We do also need to figure out the AC. So I've already kind of been in the process of filming a video in which we kind of rebuild the AC system. All new seals, new evaporator, new dryer, bunch of new parts. I'm waiting to get the AC system charged until the car is driving mechanically well. So you guys will see that here soon. But I guess without further ado, I'm gonna get driving home and we're gonna quickly run through all the parts that I have replaced, as well as the cost of all of those parts, because it was about 3 times what I was hoping it would be. Two items before we get started. Number one, I will have this complete parts list in the description along with the part numbers for anyone that might be doing their rebuild or might be interested in any of the parts I'm listing off. Again, part numbers will be in the description. Second off, you might be wondering what I'm sitting in. This is my Saab desk chair. I made it from a free 9.3 seat, just a base model seat that my buddy Anthony was just giving away. I'd like to upgrade it to a nicer seat at some point when I eventually get the time or a chance, but if you're interested in how I made this, check out the video in the top right corner. So without further ado, let's get into it. And I'm not going to be listing off the price of every part, but at the end I will give you guys the total cost down to the penny that I spent on the rebuild. Let's start with some of the fun parts, meaning the Do88 parts. I did partner with Do88 for some of these videos, so I did get a slight discount on their parts. First off, we have their radiator. To go along with their radiator, there's also the Do88 coolant hose kit and the clamp kit, their turbo pressure hose kit and associated clamps, the turbo inlet hoses and clamps, their crankcase vent hose and clamps, their turbo blow-off valve hose and clamps, their throttle body preheating hoses and clamps, their brake vacuum hose and clamps, and their idle control hoses and clamps. So that all in all was 9 separate kits from Do88 that all went together to pretty much give me their full catalog minus their intercooler, which maybe we'll do at some point, but we'll see. These parts were also ordered from a wide variety of resources. I mean, we're talking obviously Do88 is one, Saab parts, Rock Auto, various parts sources in Europe, RBM, Nordic Speed, way more. I can't even think of them all off the top of my head. I have probably 15 or 20 parts invoices sitting inside. But we have our piston ring set, our rod bearing set, our main bearing set, our thrust washers. Then we move on to our intake timing guide, our exhaust timing guide, our upper timing guide, our actual timing chain, our head gasket, our cylinder head bolts times 10, obviously, new thermostat, our new master to slave cylinder line that needed to be replaced. It was super old. Our slave cylinder, a brand new coolant tank, a brand new crankshaft pulley because the rubber in the old crankshaft pulley was falling apart. We have 8 new lifters. This car has 16 lifters. I was able to source these lifters secondhand off of a junkyard engine with good lifters. If you needed new lifters, they're going to be a lot more expensive than the $5 a piece junkyard ones I got.
Both of our crankshaft seal, the front crankshaft as well as the rear crankshaft, our oil pan gasket, or basically the gasket that goes between the engine and the transmission. Water pump and gasket, the water pump to engine gasket, intake manifold gasket, exhaust manifold gasket, exhaust stud kit, the fuel rail banjo bolt seal. Those are the little metal / rubber seals that go on the fuel rail. We had 4 of those that we replaced. We also had 8 fuel injector O-rings we replaced, an oil pump O-ring, our timing chain tensioner O-ring. There's actually 2 separate timing chain tensioner O-rings, so that's listed on there twice. Our timing cover gaskets. This was printed from Modern Classic Saab. Mine was just slightly off, so I didn't end up using them. I just used Gasket Maker on those and a couple of other covers for the engine where we weren't able to get gaskets. A lot of other people have done these with the rebuilds as well. Let's take a break from listing off all those boring parts real quick. And if you're interested in purchasing a Build It Better t-shirt to help support the channel, thank you to everyone that has already. It's been amazing to see the support on these shirts. You can check out the link at the top of the description to purchase or to your own. Extremely comfortable, high quality material, and I've been wearing mine just about every day I work on this car. We also replaced the turbo to exhaust manifold gasket, the valve stem seals, 16 of those, the valve cover gasket, and the valve cover nipple. There's also the coolant and the PCV hardline. That thing was a pain to replace. The turbo oil line O-ring, the turbo line gasket, another turbo line gasket, the oil pickup tube O-ring, the oil plug gasket seal, oil filter, of course, input shaft seal, input shaft cover seal, 7 new flywheel bolts because my old ones were stretched, 2 new accessory drive belts, our power steering belt. The AC belt, if you're wondering, didn't get replaced because I had bought a new one last year when we did the manual swap. We also replaced the power steering supply line. We got a bunch of generic vacuum hose, the AC expansion valve, the AC receiver dryer. Like I said, you guys will see that soon in a video when I eventually fix these leaks and get the AC system recharged. Inner CV joint boot kit, 2 of those, outer CV joint boot kit, 2 of those, and our steering rack boots, 2 of those because those were ripped and old. And well, that brings our grand total to 62 unique parts replaced. Anything that was multiples of 2 or 4 or 8 didn't get counted more than once, but 62 different parts got replaced in the process of this rebuild. And well, you might be wondering how much that costs. Now, I went OEM where I could. I also bought cheaper where I could as well. So if one site had a crankshaft for $20 cheaper than a different site, I bought it from there. But like I said, I also went OEM where I could as well. And that brings our grand total to, drum roll, $3,045.30. I went into this rebuild hoping to spend about $1,000, and well, as you tear stuff apart, you realize more and more things need to be replaced. So if you're just doing a simple head gasket job on one of these, obviously you're not going to be spending $3,000, but if you want to go down to the bones, down to the bare metal of this, replace every bearing, seal that you can, as well as upgrade some parts like some Do88 things, well, expect to be spending, I would say, at least $2,000, possibly north of $3,000. And obviously, as you can tell, I was able to find every single one of these parts. There are some parts that are getting quite difficult to find, such as some timing guides. But besides that, I was able to replace everything. Some of them were a bit problematic to find, but in the end, I found them. I'm not sure what the next video on this car will be, but that's going to officially wrap up the rebuild series on my Saab 900 Turbo. So we've got to sort out some more leaks, which will obviously add to this cost list a bit more. Hopefully not more than another $100 or $200, but yeah, I am now quite a bit of money into this car. I don't want to go into exactly how much, but it's Probably more than you think, unfortunately, just over the year of owning it. That's it for today though. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed. Thank you all so much for watching. These shirts will be linked in the description. See you all next time.